Welcome, everyone, to our transgender discussion panel. I'd like to thank you for coming out today. My name's Kobe Condry. I use he, him, his pronouns. I am a member of the Board of Trustees here at the Denton Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, and I'm also on the social justice team, which is engaged with ensuring that we are representing underrepresented groups throughout our society, including the LGBTQ community. So thanks for coming out today. I do want to offer some thanks. First of all, I would like to thank our tech magician, Hal, at the back. Let's give him a round of applause. He has solved a lot of interesting problems in the last few weeks. Thank you, Hal. I'd like to thank Reverend Eric for being very supportive of this and helping make it come true, doing some publicity for us as well. And then huge thanks to Soma Massage Therapy Studio for providing funding for our speaker gifts today. Our speaker fees today are handled by Soma. And while I'm speaking of Soma, we do need to acknowledge that the power behind the throne in the transgender community right now, and for many years, has been Amber Briggle. So she has embraced the transgender community. She has championed their rights, their recognition. We are so grateful to have her on our team and actively participating not only in the transgender community, but supporting the Unitarian Universalist cause as well. If you would like to continue seeing these kinds of events happen, we do welcome any kind of a donation that you could make. You could go to our website, which is the dentonuuf.org, and click on the donate button, and from there you can get a link to our donation software interface. And when you are doing that, there will be a place where you can put a comment in. If you put in the comment social justice, then we'll know that you're making a donation towards that specific activity of this congregation. So I would like now to invite our moderator, Nova Martin, to take her place on the stage, and our panelists as well will come up and we'll get things going. We will have a 20-minute Q&A session after the main questions have been answered. If you would like to ask a question of the panelists, please raise your hand, get the attention of our usher Jeff, and he'll bring you an index card that you can write the question on. There are pens in the little pockets behind the seats, and we will take your questions up to Nova and let Nova decide which ones to read out in case we run out of time. We do want to wrap up shortly after 3. So thank you again for coming, and let's turn it over to Nova. Thank you so much.
And I'm also honored to be here. I do want to thank Amber Briggle for originally asking me to moderate the discussion today. I am a member here of DUF, and that's what we call it, DUF. DUF has been very supportive and accepting and welcoming of me as a trans person, as a human being, really. And it's something that I actually want to say thanks for that. I don't really have to say thanks because they do it automatically, but it's been a real blessing in my life. So I'm excited to be here in this place that is a very special and sacred place to me, having this conversation. We're going to aim for just having it feel like a conversation, very natural, and aim for 100% authenticity as much as folks are comfortable. So without further ado, we'll get started. I'm going to just go through the panelists here and have you all introduce yourselves. Tell us a quick kind of couple lines on your story, and what is special. What do you want the world to know about you?
Would you like to start here?
Yeah, Jess. Let's.
Hi, Check. Okay. Hi, my name is Jess Herbst. If you've heard of me, you probably know that I was the first openly transgender elected official in the state of Texas. I was mayor of the sprawling metropolis of New Hope, Texas, about 500 people just north and east of McKinney. I am a transgender woman. I came out publicly in 2017. At the time, I happened to be mayor, and it got a little bit of attention, not too much. I'm married. I've been married for 43 years to the lovely woman sitting next to Amber. Say hi to Debbie. I appreciate her every day because she puts up with me, which I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't want to. I'm a grandmother. I have 3 toddler grandchildren, 3.5-year-old twins, a boy and a girl named Archer and Ava, and their big sister Autumn. Their parents are Andrew and Alexandria, and their last name is Hull, so we have a whole bunch of A-hulls in our family. And on one last note before I turn it over, I will have to tell you that I would not be here except that one day some woman hit me in the back of the head with a wooden frame, and her name was Amber.
Hi there, my name is Eli Compton. I use he, him pronouns, and I currently have the lovely opportunity to work here at DOOF as the administrator. Can confirm, wonderful congregation of human beings and a wonderful part of the Denton community for a lot of reasons, but things like this in particular, of course, speak to me. But yeah, I grew up in a small town in northwest Texas, not too far from here. I have an identical twin sister, which is always a fun way to open up a conversation with people sometimes about trans issues. But I came out when I was 19, so that would have been in 2007, and it would be 2008 when I transitioned. So I was on the path to be ordained in the Methodist Church, but that did not work out for obvious reasons. Ended up going a different direction for graduate school, and found myself working at UNT, which kind of brought me into the Denton area. And unfortunately, that stopped with the pandemic, like a lot of folks. But I've been here ever since and have no intention of going anywhere else. So I'm here with my wonderful partner, Doug, as well. We have 2 furry cats, and that's as much of the little furry babies we want right now, but.
All right, well, I'm Cameron Wright, and I'm 18, so I don't have like a giant family, like I don't have kids or anything. I have a son, but he's a dog, so that's pretty cool. I came out as transgender when I was 11 years old, so I mean, I'm still pretty young, right? I'm 18, so it wasn't that long ago, but I've been living my life, doing a lot of advocacy work, so like I travel a lot, do a lot of things, and I don't have a partner, but my mom's here. She's over there. Oh, next to Amber as well. She's basically how I'm able to do anything, really. I wouldn't be here without her, obviously, but in different ways as well. I grew up in Colorado, and that's a fun fact. I'm not from Texas, but I've been here for 6-7 years, so this is like my secondary home, I guess. Yeah, I guess that's that's about it.
Well, I do want to just, I don't know if the mic's on or not. I do want to welcome y'all again, Cameron, Eli, and Jess. I'm excited to have this conversation today. We had some chit chat before, and all 3 of these folks have done some really cool things. So I hope they'll share it with you all. To get started, we're going to kind of start with, I feel like what I think is kind of a heavy question. So reflecting on this year, it's been a pretty rough year to be a trans person in Texas. The past couple years have. Over 150 bills were introduced that targeted trans and queer folks. Plus, my experience, I am constantly swimming against the stream in terms of acceptance from family or with the community. You stack that up on being a target, by a political party. I'm curious, kind of all that context. I guess we'll start with Jess and just kind of go in this order. What are some ways that
Well, I'll start off by saying that I really have not been swimming upstream, particularly with family. I'm one of the lucky people because I have had tremendous support from my wife, from my children. So I've had that kind of as a backbone, but I have gone against the stream. And as I've told you earlier, I did a lot of early advocacy against SB6. Today, I function pretty much just as a grandmother in day-to-day life, and what I find for myself is that the more positive an outlook I have, the more confidence I have in myself, the more I just eliminate the fear, the more people will respect that and treat me with respect. I kind of look at it as my job every day that I go out in the world to show people that trans people are human beings, just like everybody else. I have to get up and shower and dress, and I have to feed myself, and I have to take care of my grandkids just like everybody else. And I try to do it in such a way that, like I said, just shows the humanity that everyone is a human being. And it's, honestly, I think it is making a difference. You mentioned the 150 bills, and I'm not really surprised. I'm an old person. Hopefully I'll be a lot older, but I grew up as a child in the 60s, and my father was a dentist who had a waiting room for white people and a waiting room for non-white people, and I watched all of that change. And I also watched the immediate pushback from the other side. I watched the lies that were told about how you couldn't go to the bathroom with a person of color because they were going to attack you and they were all criminals. And the exact same thing that I see going on right now, the things they say about trans people. And it's just pure and simple fear-mongering. So the more I can do on a daily basis to alleviate that fear in society, to alleviate the fear in the people who don't know who trans people are, who have never heard anything but all the lies, I feel like that's really my purpose, is just to go out there and make people comfortable. And it's not hard to do. It's just a matter of being comfortable with yourself, be comfortable around other people. And to me, that's the biggest weapon I have, is that I am confident in myself. I know who I am. I'm comfortable with it. I'm not ashamed of it. And I'm a human being. And the more we all do that, and I'm talking to the people that are trans or non-binary, the more you be confident in yourself, the less you fear, the better off we are. Because what we're really fighting is fear. It is fear that is being thrown against us as the weapon. It's fear that is the problem. And the more you can eliminate fear in people, the better off we're going to be.
I really like that response and would echo, say like, I very much agree that that is a great way to alleviate like a lot of that anxiety, at least for me, is feeling like I am making a positive contribution and demonstrating the humanity of, hopefully the community that I belong to when I'm interacting with people outside of that. And a part of what that process looks like for me is also taking time to manage the emotional chaos that can kind of come. Like I feel like anger is something that I struggle with a lot, where like so much of the time the anger can strip us of the ability to see other people as human in the same way that we're seeking to be seen as human. And I feel like it's really important to try and, like, as much as possible, and that's something that not every person can do, like especially with trans people, they might not have the opportunity to take a step back and unplug and find the things that bring them joy, make them feel at peace. They can kind of bring you back to that centered place where, we remember that we are all people, and for the most part, like there are the very, very small part of the population that's born with tendencies towards like being psychopathic or something like on a legitimate basis. But for the most part, I really do believe most people are good. And even the people who are so filled with anger and hate and fear, for us, like if you look at it, it's not coming from us. It's not something we're doing. It's not anything that like we have done. It's something else that's going on with those people and the society around them. And I try to, and to do that, like there's things that I try to work through, like a list of, okay, I'm feeling this way. I'm going to put on music that I know pulls me to a more positive space. It helps me to think about other people in a different way. I'm going to take the time to do my hobbies, where like the anxiety that I feel, I know that I can alleviate that when I'm mowing the lawn, doing gardening, doing carving, woodworking, stuff like that, that I can just literally kind of shut out the world that is being very, very unkind and come back to a place where I remember that that's not the entire world. Because that's what it sometimes feels like. Like that's everyone, that's the entire world. But finding the space, the opportunity, and the support to like remember that, yeah, it's not every person who hates trans people, even the people who are very loud about it, that do make a lot of waves, like they're still relatively small in number compared to people who, you know, if they don't actively support trans people, they don't think about us enough to hate us. So yeah, trying to keep to that space so that I don't act from anger, so that I don't become the thing that they fear reasonably. And that's important for my day-to-day, for staying calm.
I like agree with everything that was just said, so it's kind of hard to like build off of that. But I guess like for me, the way that I deal with like all the emotions that I feel and that I process, and like being so young, it's hard to like know how to like feel and like grow up, because you're also dealing with like everything that like a normal teenager goes through. So I got like college and growing up and figuring out what I'm doing with my life, all that stuff. And so like sometimes everything feels so like overwhelming that it's like hard to like function and think about anything, because you just feel that like the whole world is against you and you get overwhelmed. But I think some things that I've done that like to make me feel and get out of that headspace is just like thinking about what I can do in this moment to like make it better so people don't have to feel like this. This is like originally why I started like doing advocacy work, because I I didn't want other people to feel these negative emotions, because it's so hard and it's like a terrible thing, and I don't want to feel it, so I don't want anyone else to go through what I've gone through. And I'm like still like I keep saying this, but I'm still young, so it's like I haven't had that much life, but I've already experienced so much like negativity and hate just growing up, and I'm just trying to be myself. So when I get overwhelmed, I just think of like what I can do to fight like for like the ability to be myself and to help others not feel this emotion and not feel this way. And like I also agree with like music and hobbies and stuff like that. I use music for every single thing that I do. So if I get too overwhelmed, I will just like put on music and like play a game or do something just to like distract my brain, even if it's for like a split second, just for a moment, and just think about like everything that I can do, maybe in the future or now, anything I can act on to like make it better for the world and for me and for people, just anyone that I can help out, because I know a lot of people have a voice but are sometimes scared to use it. So if I have the ability to talk and do some good, then I will try my best to take that ability and make it better for everyone else, and just like stop that overwhelming like sensation of just like hatred and guilt, and then all the other ones just like combined into like a big like ball that just like fogs up your head and you can't think about anything else. So I think that's something that I do a lot.
Yeah, Cameron, I like that for me there's a nugget in there of like the core idea is what can I do, right? Because oftentimes I can speak for myself, you know, it's like, well, there's this going on, I feel this way, I feel attacked this way, but sometimes it's about bringing it down to, well, what can I actually do? And if you stop and think about it, there's a lot of stuff that we can do, you know, in terms of visibility and action. And so I think that's a very wise and inspiring way to approach things. I guess we'll go with another one that's kind of deep. It has two parts to it. What's been the most, or a couple things, it has to be one thing, but challenging aspects or frustrating aspects about your transgender experience, and then share in the opposite direction. What's been the most fulfilling or maybe magical aspects of your experience as a transgender person? I guess we'll just keep going.
So I get to make all the points and then they have to work off
Well,
of it?
should we shuffle it? Should we
You
shuffle
probably should
it?
shuffle
Yeah, let's
it.
shuffle it, yeah. Eli, do you want to go?
Sure. Yeah, when it comes to things that are frustrating, and my experience as a trans person, when you first let us know that question, my first thought went to things that are happening, I think, more recently, the past year, 2, 3, because it's been frustrating on just a completely different level to have so many people, or at least perceivably as such. It's not a huge group of people, but very loud people, very with amplified platforms, people speaking about trans people as though they know something about our lives, as though they know anything about our intentions, our thoughts and desires. And they don't. They actively, openly hate us. And the people that they get their information from about us are also very openly hating trans people. It's a part of their identity at some level at this point. It would almost appear. And it's frustrating that when trans people do try to speak for ourselves, to, write our own stories, so much of the time it's not really visible, or it's not as visible. I mean, there's every other time I see a debate on trans issues on a news program, they might have one trans person and 2 or 3 other cis people there, and I'm like, what is this debate even supposed to be? Whether or not we should be able to exist? Why do you have people on the other side of that? Can't you just listen to us? So that's been frustrating. But on the other side of that, there's been so much, I mean, just the opportunity to exist without feeling like you're lying all the time is a very magical thing. If you've ever had the misfortune of having to be deceitful, or just what it feels like when you're not able to be yourself. And that is something that on every single day for me, even though it's been 15 years since I started transitioning, there's not a moment that I've ever thought had any kind of regret. And I still feel like I get to be surprised every day at how wonderful just certain little things are. I like wearing a t-shirt when I mow the lawn. That's not something that I was able to do very much at all growing up when I learned how to mow the lawn. It was a terrible experience because, especially as I got older, you have layers for binding and stuff like that, and doing physical labor outside in the heat in Texas, it becomes torture. And there's so many parts of my life that I didn't realize had kind of become that until I got to do things the way I wanted to. And it's a very wonderful part of the day-to-day.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, it's a deep question. I guess some of the stuff that I've struggled with, being trans, was kind of just the overwhelming feeling that if I said anything to anyone, they'd just immediately hate me or treat me differently. So growing up and being a kid, I kept it to myself. I'd go anywhere and I wouldn't tell anyone anything about me. It's been 1 year since I've even openly said that I am trans, because for the longest time I've just felt like I wasn't supposed to be. My life was not supposed to be here, but because of everyone's reaction and the whole world just wanting to hate on trans people, that I just felt like I wasn't supposed to be the way that I felt that I was supposed to be, because I felt just it would be better if I hid who I was, and if I had grown up as the kid that I guess was envisioned for me in this the stance of the world, I guess. And I just always feel very I always felt regretful, and I shouldn't be who I was, and that it was just really hard to deal with all that. So that's one of the biggest things that I've had to deal with, being a trans person. And even then, I've had people who I thought were my friends, I'd tell them, and then they'd start using it against me if they were mad at me. And so I would tell someone like a secret, like I kept it a secret, and I'd tell them and I'd let them in, and they'd like start dead naming me if they were mad at me or something like that. And I'm like, all right, well, this proves that you obviously don't care about me and you just want to hurt me anytime you're upset with me. And it's just been hard, and that's probably like the hardest thing I've done is just like the fear of what other people think, because it's so hard to deal, like that's like how the world works now, that you get judged on everything you do, and if someone doesn't agree with you, they'll have a very like large opinion about you, whether you did something or not, if you're just existing. That's why it's like people just always hate on trans people for existing, but I'm like, I don't know what you want me to do. Like I don't want to be this way either, but if this is the way that I have to be to feel myself, then that's what I'm going to do, because I don't want to live a lie. And then I guess the good side about being trans is the community is one of the big things that I would say that has like helped me through everything. Just getting to know other trans people and having a loving and supporting family and having friends who actually like you and won't do anything to hurt you, and they are listening to you and they're here for you, and just having like a bond with someone that can like openly like tell you that they love you and support you no matter like who you are or what you do. Because I had like a hard time doing that when I was like coming out. I was in like 6th grade, so I was like 11 and 12 like that year, and that was a really rough year for me, but I somehow managed to do it, and I'm all right. So I made it, but it was hard to like tell my teachers, and then my friends were like, what are you talking about? Like, you can't do that. That's not allowed, because we were kids. And we didn't know that like being trans was even like an option. Like, that's not something that you get taught or that you like know about. So when I like figured it out, I like was like in a fight with my mom, and I yelled at her, and then I was like, maybe it's because I want to be a boy, and she was like, oh, and then it just like progressed from there, and just like figuring out who I actually am, and like what I want to do, and what I want to feel being this way. And actually my best friend is like a cisgender like man who just he doesn't know about lots of things, but for some reason he became my best friend, which is insane, because obviously I'm trans and I'm like a big advocate and I'm part of the LGBTQ community, right? So he's like opened a whole new horizon for him, and he's still here with me, and he doesn't care who I am. He just wants to be my friend and support me. So I think that's like a great thing, that just like when I'm finally like open and true to myself, that the amount of people who love and support me is just widened my horizon, and I'm very grateful for everything that I have now.
Jess?
I'm going to pause my answer and tell you that I am so proud of you. When I was 11, I felt exactly like you did, but I wasn't as brave as you. I waited 50 years, well, 45 years. I couldn't do what you did, and so I just had to say, you make me proud. Sorry, hormones for, I don't know, 8 years, they tend to make me a little bit weepy at times, but I'm gonna take this in a little bit different and just go completely personal. What frustrates me as being a trans person, particularly a trans person who came out later in life, is, well, my voice. I can take all the hormones in the world, and it will do this, and I can walk out and no one questions that I'm a woman or not until I speak. And I cannot tell you how many times going through a drive-through, it's like, I would like this, and this, and this is my sweetest voice, and it's like, yes, sir. And then, of course, the flip side of that is you get to the drive-through window, and they're like, oh, shit, I screwed up. You know, and there's really not a whole lot to do about it. Once you go through what I call testosterone poisoning when you're in puberty, there are certain things that are just extremely difficult to change. So that's really my biggest personal frustration, is that no matter what I do, no matter how I look, that when I open my mouth, somebody is going to go, oh. The flip side of that is how many people just don't care. I went to I always get messed up, White House, Black Market, White House, the store that sells the black and white clothes. I went there yesterday, the first time I've been in years and years and years. I actually had gone once back, even before I started taking hormones, when I was just trying to get get a grip on, can I do this? Because I mean, like you said, you know, we were never told there was an option. And so you spend your whole life thinking, well, that would be nice, but I can't do that. And so at one point in my life, I decided to determine, can I do this? And so my wife and I had gone into the store, and we were treated really poorly by the salespeople. Went in there yesterday, they were as sweet as they could be, set them up a changing room, just as nice. And when I got to the register, they asked for my phone number, not thinking I give my phone number, and my dead name comes up on the screen. And I'm like, and it's like, let's fix that. And she was like, okay, what do we need to fix? You know, well, change those F's to S's. Yeah, same address. Okay, you got it? Perfect. And she was as sweet as she could be. And it is the fact that today there are more and more of those people everywhere I go. That's my happy place, to know that in spite of this ridiculous voice of mine that will never pass a drive-through, there are people that will be nice to me.
Jess, all of that resonates with me. We have tissues right here too. If you need them.
I'll be okay.
Yeah,
Let me know if my mascara starts dripping down, but it's a black dress, so I should be okay.
I got you. Yeah, I very much, the voice is something that's sometimes excruciating for myself. And also I think for myself, having transitioned a little bit later in life, it's a little tricky. And it's interesting, what I love about this panel here is having the spectrum of age. Now I know, Cameron, you probably feel like you're surrounded by a bunch of old folks, but I mean, I don't want to speak for, I'll just throw myself in there, but I think there's a lot of beauty. I see courage in different ways. I'm kind of throwing out a little bit of editorial here, but doing my Sally Jesse Raphael. With a lot of the folks who are growing up right now, you know, Cameron, your generation, even younger, we have concepts now that the concepts existed 80 years ago. They've been around forever. That's a big misunderstanding. Trans people have been around for thousands of years. I personally believe it's a biological experience, but I won't go down that road. But I just lost my thought. I'm going to try and get it back. But your generation, you have the tools, you have the language, but it still is very hard. It's always hard to be a young person, always. And so I think there's a lot of courage in saying, you know what, this is who I am at a young age, and also wisdom. Because I felt things at a young age, but I maybe wasn't smart enough to figure it out. And so I really admire that from you and from a lot of young folks. But then we go on the other side of the scale, folks it takes a lot of guts to come out at 40 and 50 years old. It was in my head for the longest time, no one's going to accept me in my family and my friends, and that has not been the case at all. And similar to what you said, Jess, what I found mostly, people, when I have a lot of friends around the country, and they ask me, oh, you're in Texas, and I'm like, you know what? People don't care. I usually use a different word, but an expletive. People don't give a flip, really. It's what I've found. Now, I don't want to allow that to us, like, say, oh, everything's hunky-dory. But it's interesting, though, like, people mostly don't care. And really, they shouldn't, you know? It's like, we're just human beings, you know? So, y'all got me inspired. Sorry, I went down a little editorial rabbit hole. Cameron, let's start with you on this one. What's your predictions on the future of trans rights in the U.S. and Texas?
Prediction.
Or direction?
I hope I hope that just maybe even if it takes like 20 years more, I just hope that at some point we can stop using being trans as like a political debate and just accept people are different than other people and we're just trying to be ourselves. But right now, it's hard, right? Because we said like earlier, there's like 50, 150, like a bunch of bills being passed and people still trying to take us down. But I think that just like overall, like hopefully that we become more progressive. And it's kind of more progressive, I would say. Like obviously I'm not going to go get like, well, actually, never mind. I take that back. Never mind. But it's it's kind of coming more to the public and like people realizing that being trans is a thing and like enlightening people. And some people, like you said, they don't care. Like they're just like, whatever, you're a human, I don't care, you do you, right? But then there's people who just don't want to take that for an answer and they're just trying to bash you down. I'm like, all right, but you don't know me. You can't tell me that I'm a monster. I'm not supposed to be the way I am if you don't know me. So hopefully, like, however long it takes, I hope that like in the near future, if I'm still alive, like even if it takes that long till the point where I'm not even here anymore, that just people see people for people and nothing else and nothing more. You are just a human trying to live your life as well as everyone else.
Jess, let's go with you.
As a former politician, I have a little bit of an insight in the way the politics works. And yeah, there's been literally hundreds of bills passed. But if you step back a little bit and look, maybe a handful are stuck. We have courts striking these things down left and right. Politicians want one thing, to get reelected. And the more these bills get struck down, that's a black mark on their record. That will not get them reelected. Slowly but surely, as much as they've ramped up, as much as they're trying their very best to get their small vocal group of people together to push us down, the world around them is changing. Last week, the Pope, I'm not Catholic, I was raised Episcopal, Catholic light, but the Pope came out and said that transgender people can be baptized, that transgender people can be godparents, that children of same-sex parents can be baptized. That's a huge thing, and that carries a lot of weight, not just in the United States, not just in Texas, but worldwide. Turn on television right now. You've got to really try hard. Maybe if you keep your channel tuned to Newsmax, you won't see it, but if you turn on anywhere else, you're going to see trans representation. You're going to see queer representation. You're going to see non-binary people. We're in everything. There's a new Hunger Games movie coming out that I don't know if you know is starring Hunter Schafer, a very talented trans actress. Super excited about that. Watching the newest episode of Sex Education from the BBC. Oh my goodness. I went to a thing in Austin several years back called Queer Bomb, and now it's a TV show. It's just, it's unbelievable. Like I said, they're pushing really hard, but they're not seeing the handwriting on the wall. They're not looking at what's going on around them. Everywhere you look, you are seeing more representation from trans people. One of my stock lines when I would do these speeches was like, when I was a child, the only representation we had of a trans person was Norman Bates. He was a killer. Then there was the person in Silence of the Lambs, also a killer. But then for light comedy, we had the hookers. That was trans representation when I was a child. It's not so anymore. It's changing, and it's changing a little bit all the time. Not just in spite of, but I also honestly believe a little bit because of all the massive BS misinformation that's being pushed out there. The world is an interesting place with an equilibrium. You push one way, something pushes back against you, and they're pushing really hard, and I see the pushback already. I'm an optimist, obviously, and I know we are right now in a really hard time. I mean, Texas is horrible right now for somebody, particularly like Amber, who has to struggle with a trans child, for, Cam, younger people. And it is going to be rough on quite a few of us for a while. But in the long run, I see the handwriting on the wall, and I think that this will be a non-issue in 10 years. That's my personal belief.
Yeah, I think that is, I would agree with that assessment, and just like add that to me, a big part of that is like with technology today, like the opportunity to actually hear other people's experiences and voices and stories. Like, it's at our fingertips, for better or for worse, and there's a lot of opportunity to manipulate that and put out false information, but there is also just a lot more opportunity to see the other parts of the world and those other people's lives and judge that for yourselves. And the more people see like trans lives and representation in media and other forms too, the more they see that like we are just people, that we are, I mean, honestly, sometimes I'm not saying I wish that anything that they say were true, but it would be like kind of interesting if it was like even remotely that fantastical or extreme or radical. But most trans people, I think, are as boring as anyone else. And the more we get the opportunity to just see that and be that, that's where we're headed, like to the point where it doesn't make sense to put like political energy towards an issue that people don't have any real concern for. But on the other side of that, just on a broader political level, like I do have concerns that it is, even though it's not a legitimate concern and not like a valid part of like the political arm of certain groups, it is still a popular thing with those groups, and it is still a thing that they see themselves as being able to do to make society better if they were in power. And that is concerning, and I don't think we should expect that to just resolve itself. Like I do think that the arc of justice bending towards absolutely, but we've also seen steps where things that we never thought would be rolled back, rights that we never thought would be taken away. I remember when I was in law school talking about Roe v. Wade and people asking, what do we do if this is like overturned? And every single professor saying, I mean, it would destroy half of the body of law and how states function and do all this stuff. And also there's not really a valid, legitimate basis upon which they could overturn that. And that's why, and then it happened. And there are things like that that I am concerned for, but I have more hope than not that it will get better as opposed to worse. But I think that is something we all have to be intentional and active about.
That last part, being active, I think is a key actually of the future of trans rights, is that we can't let off the gas. I'm looking at time. I think we're supposed to wrap at 3. Is that right? Okay. So I do have a question that we'll close out with that I'll ask y'all, but I do want to take some audience questions. We'll have to see on the time, but I think we'll probably have time for about 2 or 3. So apologies for all the integrity everybody put in. Let's see. That's a great one.
While she's looking at that, I can't help but pop it. About the Roe v. Wade. If you pay attention to what's going on, did you see what happened with the elections this last week?
Absolutely.
Because of Roe v. Wade, my favorite part of all that is Moms for Liberty, the anti-trans group, got completely shut down to the point where everyone virtually that they endorsed lost. And the very next day after the elections, they took down their endorsement page because nobody wants to be associated with them. So again, you push one way, there's a pushback, and that Roe v. Wade pushback is happening big time right now. And I foresee a time when the same thing will happen with the trans rights. It's just, if you're up there saying we're going to restrict people's access to legitimate medical care, that will be a one-way ticket to nowhere in political land.
I think there are some great questions in here. Thanks y'all for sharing and writing them down. We're not going to have time for all of them, but we can maybe informally bring them up when we're hanging out afterwards. Let's see. There is one specific one here for one of our panelists, and then we'll do some, just everybody can chime in. Let's start with this one. I think it's a great question. Do you have a hero or someone who inspires you to keep being your authentic self, or maybe who inspired you to be your authentic self? Somebody, a key figure in your life, or a hero. Let's start with Jess.
Do I have a hero in my life? I mean, I would love to pinpoint one person, but no. In general, my wife is my hero. She has been a godsend to me since the day we met. She has always encouraged me to be myself.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, because we went, okay. Sorry, Space Cat. Actually, let's start with Eli on this one. This is a pretty practical question, but I think it's definitely a reality of the trans experience. When cisgender folks mess up and misgender you or use the wrong pronouns, what are your favorite ways to correct or apologize in the moment? Or it may have been, Eli, for you, it may have been, 15 years ago when you were starting out. Did you have any favorite, ways that you kind of re-guided them or corrected them?
For me, what worked best was just to be very direct and nonchalant about it, like to be like, oh, yeah, don't forget he, him, or, oh yeah, Eli, right? And, not make a big deal about it. Depending on the person that you're with. Like if it's someone that you've had that conversation with, they've, voiced their support, and they are trying, like, I think that it's a great opportunity to support them while they're, like, changing some very hardwired stuff in their brain, like in terms of how they talk to you and about you. And I always try to be like, again, depending on the circumstances, and if this is a person who's trying and it's a mistake that they made, just be like, hey, if they do have a moment of panic where they're like, oh gosh, I'm sorry. It's like, no, this is fine. You're working on it. I'm here with you. We're working on it together, and I really, really appreciate it. And just not putting as much pressure as they might think that you might be putting on it, making that clear to them, like, yeah, what matters is that you're trying, that you care, and that you're listening to me and you're respecting me. And there's like a process that happens when like people change this much in your life, and I'm here with you for that. And of course, that doesn't mean to sit back and take it when people like might be misgendering you intentionally or to be derogatory. Like that's the point to, again, I still think being simple and direct is the best, to just say, no, this is not going to work. If you want to keep talking to me like that, I'm going to leave. And that's it, period. Like, not letting the conversation devolve into like a debate over whether or not you have the right to describe your experiences. But yeah, exercising understanding and appreciation as much as possible so that when those mistakes happen, they don't become like a big deal and the person can continue progressing towards like the place they need to be.
Cameron, what about yourself? You've probably had a unique experience being in middle school and high school, so yeah.
Well, my mom can vouch for me on this, but I don't care sometimes. I don't correct people, which, I mean, obviously I should, right? But sometimes it's like a random person who I'll never meet again, so I'm like, if you like misgender me, like the voice over the drive-thru, they'll be like, ma'am, and I'm like, I'll just move on with my life because I got other things to worry about. But like if it's someone that I like know, that I like, I don't know. I guess, yeah, being direct, simple, just being like, hey, just so you know, that's not what I go by anymore. That's not my pronouns. Like, just, like, correct them and be, like, polite about it. Like, don't freak out and yell at somebody if they do it wrong, because then they're going to be like, well, I don't want to talk to you anymore. So it kind of, like, ruins everything. But I think, yeah, just being, like, simple and calm and just being like, hey, just so you know, like, I'm not upset or anything, but just in the future, if you want to, like, refer to me, just remember that it's he, him, and that type of stuff. So I think that's very simple. But yeah, me personally, sometimes I just don't care sometimes. But overall, just be polite about it.
I want to underscore what Eli said. First of all, and that is, it isn't what they say. It isn't which pronouns they use. It's the intention behind it. And I have guys I've worked with at my job for, well, one guy I've worked for over 30 years, and we're great friends. He has absolutely no problem. He supports me, but he will drop into a he every now and then, and I'll give him a little jab or, Steve, and he's pretty good. But I will tell you, I am a little bit vindictive. When I run into that person who is deliberately misgendering me, I don't walk away. I stay calm, and I just misgender them. And it usually doesn't take too many before they get extremely uncomfortable. So I kind of believe in, an eye for an eye in that case. And sometimes it's amazing to see the look on their face when you misgender them, because they feel what they're trying to throw on you, and that's not what they're looking for. So.
Something you brought up earlier, Jess, about drive-thrus and your voice and whatnot. On the phone, often when I have to call for something, I'm about 50-50 on, and I can go higher and get more Southern, but what I've learned to do actually is just right off the start of the call with the service person go, I'm a transgender woman. My pronouns are she, her. And I've actually left feedback. You know, after the calls, they'll say, hey, leave feedback. I'll say, y'all should have a step in your system to ask for someone's pronouns. You know, like they don't have that now. And oftentimes, you know, you get on the call and they go, yes, sir. And I go, and then I have to give them my story, you know. But I do think being just direct about it and matter of fact, this is who I am, I think goes a long way. I do like flipping it, though. That's pretty funny. I edited the questions. I've decided to shuffle them around. So we're in Transgender Awareness Month and week. This is a great question. What should people watch, read, or listen, kind of pay attention to this week? Any podcast or any events or shows, or and maybe it doesn't have to be for this week, just, you know, kind of just to get into the experience of and education of being transgender. Let's start with Cameron.
Okay. I don't know. I was thinking like for.
Some of your videos, right?
If you want, they're out there. I think I just know a lot of shows that I watch that have good representation in them, but I don't know. But like, if you want to watch something that has like trans representation in them or something like that, there's good shows like Heartstopper. That one, one of the main characters is a black trans woman, and I love her, Yasmin Finney. She talks about it in the show, saying how she went from an all-boys school to an all-girls school, and it has representation and stuff like that, and how she's like dealing with everything. And then obviously Hunter Schafer, and I'd say Euphoria. They talk about her experience a lot. And then there's like Sex Education, which has a lot of like everything you could think of is in the show, and I've been that show since season 1. So I finished season 4 not that long ago, like the day of when it came out, and I watched everything. And the last season is a little crazy, but it does have like amazing representation about like a person who is transitioning and people who already have, and them talking and communicating and talking about what they can do and like what they go through and things like that. And yeah, I think that's all I can think of like off the top of my head. But I love all the shows, and so I've watched them multiple times through, and they have good representation. And I really enjoy the characters being like real and not like faking it, like making it like dumb or anything. Like they actually are like problems that I can relate to and that like make sense. So I think those are good shows to like watch if you want to like watch something that has like trans people in it.
Jess, you want to chime in?
Oh, sure, after Cam stole all my shows.
I was going to say, what do you have to add?
And I will reiterate, if you haven't watched Sex Education, you know, you've got, like I said, everything from people transitioning, people who've already transitioned, people who are just discovering they're gay, people who are just discovering that they're non-binary, discovering not only what that's like for them, but what that's like for their friends, what that's like for the relationships, what that's like for sex. It is sex education. It's really remarkable. I'm going to pull an odd one out of the mix, and it's a show that you probably are going to find on YouTube called Her Story. And it's a little bit older. It's from probably 2015 or so, but it is the story of an actual trans woman going through transition as an adult, changing her life, what it's like as a single adult to transition, what it's like to be in relationships, what it's like to try to date in this world, which is something I've been lucky not to have to do for 40 some odd years, 43 years, I think. It is a really good show if you can find it. Her Story. It is an all-trans cast. It was an all-trans production. Everybody involved in it was trans or non-binary, and it's very wonderfully done. Her Story.
Yeah, I feel like there's not very many shows left to pick from, but I would definitely echo like Sex Education, Heartstopper, and not just for like trans representation, but I think that those two shows in particular are great pieces of media to watch for. Like Olivia Colman plays the mom of one of the students in Heartstopper, and like the way that she processes her son coming out as bisexual, I think is like it's models just very well like a very good response, a very loving, compassionate response, and I love that about those. And there is another show that it came out a few years ago on Hulu. It was produced in New Zealand. It's about a trans man. It features actual trans people, like that's writers as well as in the cast. I cannot remember the name of it. I think it starts with an R, but it was on the tip of my tongue. I apologize, but it is there. It's a great, I just remember watching it and thinking, wow, this is the first time I've watched something about a trans guy's experience, and also came away from it thinking, yeah, I kind of wish people would watch this to see what things could be like for a lot of us. So I apologize for the vagueness of that, but it is like a New Zealand production, one season show. But finding those opportunities to, the pieces of media that feature trans people, that feature stories written by trans people about our experiences, just that's the guiding rule of thumb for me for those kinds of media. Yes, it's a Maori word.
Ruwangi?
Yes.
Am I?
And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. There's a Maori word, and that's part of what they also deal with is like the interesting dynamic between the indigenous people of New Zealand and the colonial element of New Zealand. So good on a couple of levels.
We have one last question. We'll probably go a few minutes over 3, so I hope they don't cut off our microphones. We'll see. I think it's a kind of a homework question, a practical kind of takeaway for the folks here. Before I go there, though, I do want to thank y'all for your authenticity, your candidness, your emotionality that was shared. I almost was brought to tears a couple times. I held it back. Not that there's anything wrong with tears. I cry all the time. But I do want to thank y'all for being here, being you here, and being you in this both beautiful and challenging world. So you've all inspired me today, and I've enjoyed spending this time with you. The last question here is, share with the audience, what can folks do to help? We'll go in order here, but give us like 1 to 2 examples. What would be most helpful right now for taking care of transgender people, or educating, or getting involved? What's some suggestions that y'all have?
Oh, I'm glad I got to go first. Speak up. Speak up. If people are spreading misinformation, if people are talking bad, if people are being mean, if you see people misbehaving around transgender people, or even about transgender people not around them, which is where it's going to happen most of the time, you're going to have these little groups, and you may be part of that group, and there's like, oh, well, these dirty trans people are all pedophiles and criminals and what have you. Speak up. Excuse me, but where are your statistics to back that up? I mean, where did you don't have to fight them. You don't have to argue with them. Just question them. Make them question themselves. The biggest problem that we face right now is the overall perception of society, and the overall perception of society is driven by what everybody says. If we sit there and listen to people talk bad about trans people the way we used to listen to people talk bad about people of color, the way we used to listen to people talk bad about people just from another country, if you go back to the early part of the 1900s, you were in our position just because you came from Ireland, okay? What it took was people to say, I don't think that's quite right. Where do you get that information? Is it right? If you speak up, anytime and every time you hear somebody say something bad or something most likely incorrect, question them. It's the best thing you can do.
That was my response, so, oh, man, but.
That's why I said I was glad to go first.
And I would add to that too, that that's something that I think is something that is unique to what cisgender people are able to contribute, because so often when it's a trans person who speaks up to say, oh, this isn't right, or this is, not okay, we're not taken seriously, or, we're not, it's like, well, of course you're going to respond that way. They're talking about you, it makes you upset, and a big part of your response must be because of your emotions, not the reality of the situation. And so when it comes from other people, it's just so much more helpful. And I would also say, to just very broadly, like in terms of your political activities, I think it's really important to prioritize dismantling racism. Like, my understanding of our legal history is that, like, the blueprint for oppression in this country in particular is oppression of people of color. And when we accept those kinds of systems as a reality in any part of our world and society, it makes it okay and acceptable to have those systems in place in other places, and they do exist. And it's by addressing the big issues that kind of undergird the entire thing that we're going to actually affect positive change. And that's just, for me, just on a very broad political thing to keep in mind as we kind of navigate all of these different issues, because, yeah, like we've said up here before, transgender people aren't actually a problem. We're not actually like a real cause for concern. There's no real reason why we become the subject of focus and debate, except I think that certain groups of people found using critical race theory too complicated as a scapegoat for a single issue wedge vote type of a thing. But that's just what you can do, but mostly speaking out in both of those contexts.
Cam, you got some additional wisdom?
Yeah.
Action to add on?
I like that you kind of didn't bring race into it, but the fact of oppression and things like that, that it just people pick a certain group of people and then smash them. And I like to bring this up, but I also probably shouldn't, because I don't want to make anyone feel bad. But if you look around, I might be the only one with a pigment in my skin. So I think that that's also it's hard to be a person of color and be trans, because it adds another issue to the fact of already being a person of color, because I already got other things to worry about, but now I have to worry about a different group of people also hating me for that reason as well. But I think a good reason, or a good thing to do, for everyone here, is just to support. Whether you do it from home or watch a video or do anything that you can, support is a way to make things happen. Because if you just, even if you have someone who is trans, just being near them and being supportive and just being their friend, that's a good way to support trans people. It might not change the entire world, but you'll change their life and you'll make them feel loved and appreciated, which is one step at a time. You're doing something for one person, which will make that person do something good for someone else, and then it will keep it's like a cycle. It will continue and it will keep getting bigger and larger. And just doing things in the community, even if you're just going to a pride event or anything like that, you being there and showing your support you've already done a lot, because it's that simple to help people, going to protests, doing things like that. It's that simple. If you're just there, even if you're in the background, you're showing your support, and you're making a larger number, and it will help everything eventually. You'll help even by just doing the smallest things, by supporting. And I think speaking out, obviously, but support and speak out is a big thing. And I like the thought of speaking out, even if you have no part and you don't know what you're talking about. One of my friends, I have an example. One of my friends texted me over Snapchat, and she was like, "Hey, there's this guy who I'm watching stories, and this guy is bashing trans people. I want to say something to him, but I don't know what to say." And I was like, well, at least you're trying. But I mean, you came to me, so you obviously know, you're I want to help, but I don't know how. And that's how she was. And I was like, okay, well, I gave her some things that she can build off and say in her own words. And I was like, if you want to just say that to them. And so she did. And I don't know if that changed anything. I think we haven't talked about it since, but she did come reach out to me and ask me how she could help and phrase a sentence to stop this person from being disrespectful. And I thought that was actually kind of cool, that she felt like she could come talk to me and be like, what do I do? How do I say this? Like, how do I stop this? And I was like, I really appreciate that. It felt kind of like, made me happy.
That last part is I'm real big on what I personally call like proactive kindness and proactive respect. And your friend in that case is being proactive, in terms of support for you, for trans people. So I love that. One thought I had too that no one mentioned, so I'll add in to it is vote those fascists out of power. That's the last thing I'll add is vote, vote, vote. So we are at time. We're gonna go have a little. I think there was some wine. Kobe had to stop me from drinking it before, so so we're gonna drink it now, and soft drinks as well, and water and tea. And do we have some hors d'oeuvres? Maybe, yeah. Oui. Through what do we call this back? The fellowship hall. We're going to go back in there, and everyone here is welcome to join us. And you can ask me anything if you want. I have lots of views and opinions, and I'm sure you can maybe chit chat with our panelists here. I want to thank y'all again for joining, being here today. Thank you. Yeah. That's a wrap.